So Dave Ziegler was named the new general manager of the Las Vegas Raiders. He's a John Carroll guy from the Patriots organization. Names Josh McDaniels head coach, also John Carroll guy from the Patriots organization. Two things that I want to ask you about. The Patriots, as an organization, we heard, liked Baker Mayfield coming out in that draft a whole lot. And also, Josh McDaniels been around the block. He's been a head coach before. He knows the importance of a quarterback. Thoughts on David Carr potentially becoming available, and do the Raiders now with the former Patriots? Is that something to keep an eye out for with potentially Baker Mayfield?
Yeah, there's a couple layers there, right? It's number one, how does the new regime in Las Vegas feel about Derek Carr? And, that's a big question mark. Anytime you have a takeover, the same thing's going on in Minnesota, right? How does Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and whoever he hires as coach, how do they feel about Kirk Cousins, especially guys that are entering the last year of their contracts? So it's important to see how those guys feel about Derek Carr because he's already there. We know he's loved in that locker room. So it'd be easier just to keep Derek Carr if you're McDaniels and Ziegler. The first thing I saw about that was, I think it was Michael Silver said, those two guys like Derek Carr. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to stay. It's just the initial thought. But the second layer of that is that, McDaniels liked Baker coming out, right? That's everything you read, everything you heard. I think we talked to Baker about it at one point. So if McDaniels did like him and is uncertain about Derek Carr, then that creates a potential trade scenario, right? Because if Derek Carr becomes available, there's going to be a bunch of teams lining up to get involved because there's a lot of teams that need quarterbacks, right? The Buccaneers might need a quarterback now. We know the Steelers need a quarterback. The list goes on. But if you have something that the Raiders want, it increases your chances of getting Derek Carr, right? And you'd have to give up less draft capital to get him. So that's certainly a situation that bears watching because if you talk about all these quarterbacks available that are potential upgrades to Baker Mayfield, Derek Carr would be at the top of my list. I mean, outside of the Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Derek Carr would be the next guy that I would covet if I were the Browns.
I would agree. And the Browns roster is a little bit further advanced as a whole than the Raiders are, even though the Raiders made the playoffs this season, they lost to the Bengals. But even though they're a playoff team, I think the Raiders are still a little bit behind the Browns as far as a rebuild. The other thing that I want to ask you before we go to break, coaches and quarterbacks get tied at the hip. So, there's a question there about, one, Josh McDaniel getting tied at the hip to Derek Carr. And does Kevin Stefanski want to be tied at the hip to Baker Mayfield? I mean, the first year was great, but those are questions because ultimately coach and quarterback are tied together and usually come and go together.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's interesting because, you look at Josh McDaniels and he got rid of Jay Cutler as soon as he got to Denver in that failed experiment, however long ago that was now, a decade ago, whatever it was. He could probably live a season with Derek Carr, right, the last year of his contract, and then move on from him after that and wipe the slate clean. He knows Ziegler. He probably doesn't take a hit for having 1 year with Derek Carr. Now, he might not want to waste a year on a quarterback that if he feels like he's got his own guy that he could bring in, whether it's Baker or somebody else or a draft pick. And then you have the Stefanski situation where, Baker had already been here a couple of years, had been up and down. Stefanski inherits him, and the roller coaster continued, right? A good finish to 2020. We know the bad 2021 injury plague. So you do wonder, how long Kevin Stefanski wants to kind of hitch his wagon to Baker Mayfield because they do go hand in hand. And we see coaches get fired all the time because their quarterbacks aren't good enough. So that's interesting. And you wonder how those discussions go inside Berea, where is Kevin Stefanski fine with Baker Mayfield moving forward, or does he make a strong case to Andrew Berry and Paul DePodesta and the Haslam saying, hey, my offense would work better with someone else like we've seen McVay do with the Rams?